Yeah, so there was a lot. I asked some questions about what would you like me to do today, and a few people asked different things. And I thought one of the most interesting ones was one that Helen said, one of the patrons, Helen said, about asking about the soul. What is the soul? What is it that incarnates, reincarnates, and does all the soul come here to Earth? So I'm going to give you a little talk about what my understanding of it is, a little bit of the thought about the history of the soul, history of some of the basic thoughts about what people think about the soul is, and try to give you some idea what I believe the soul to be, if there is such a thing. So if I looked at it, first of all, as a definition, which I've written down there in front of me, it says that they define it as the spiritual or immaterial parts of the human being or animal regarded as immortal. So what do we mean by it? Well, in the Greek, it's called the psyche, and that's where the word psychic comes from. So really what we're doing as a psychic, I sometimes think of myself perhaps as being, what I do as being a bit of a doctor of the soul, which I think would be quite a nice phrase for what I do, as opposed to, you know, fortune telling or whatever, or predictions, because this idea of the soul or psyche, it came from the idea of the Greek word, it actually means to breathe, which I think is, when you think about a human being, when they're alive they breathe, when they're dead they don't breathe. So people would probably thought that's what life is, isn't it? That's what the life force in the body is. When it stops breathing, there's no more breath, so the breath must have left the body. They didn't all, not all philosophical systems think that the soul is immortal. Some think it's just mortal, that we only have a soul while we're here on earth, and then when we die, that's it, it doesn't go on. But basically most people think of the soul as being that part that's perhaps different to the body. You know, they go right back again. The ancient Greeks looked at all this. People like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, they had this, they all worked on, they thought that, you know, there was a logically, there's a logical part of the mind even that continues, something that continues after death. There's something that separates from the body. The Christians and also Judaism kind of have the idea that not all things have souls. Only humans and angels have souls. Other than that, they don't believe, Christianity's traditional Christianity and Judaism don't believe that animals have souls. They don't believe that anything other than the human form has soul. That is purely limited to the human angelic forms. Now that's completely different if we look at Hinduism and we look at Jainism, which is very similar in some respects to many of the ideas of human beings, in that they say that all living beings have souls, all living things have souls. That would include even a bacteria would have a soul, that everything living has a soul. They talk in Hinduism about the jiva, which means, again, it also means the word to breathe, a bit like the Greek idea of the soul. I said, you know, psyche means to breathe as well. So they believed in they talk about the idea that all things have souls, all things, all living things have souls, right down to the simplest ant, bacteria, and animals and humans, and all things have souls. And this is all part of what they call the Atman, which is the kind of the life existence, as I suppose, of something that exists and continues. So from my point of view as a medium, I mean, I have to kind of prove that the soul goes on after death, you know, that we not only is there a soul, but we can connect with the soul. What is this soul? You know, this is something we could talk about in a minute. What is this soul? Is it just a sort of like a feeling, you know, or is it also our self, and is it also our personality? And you know, what does it consist of? So we can have a think about some of those things as we go on. Again, when I look at the kind of the Indian ideas, this idea of like the Atman, the self, the sort of self-existent essence of us all. It has different aspects. It has the ego. It has what's called the chitta, which is like our mind. And it also has Pratriki, I think it's called. I don't know if I got the word right, which is kind of our basic embodiment of existence. So all these things come together to create what we could call the soul. Some people, and I believe this too, you know, some people say that not only animals have it, not only does like bacteria and the simplest of things have a soul, but I think anything that has form also has a rudimentary soul as well. So this is what you would call animalism or animism, which is like the idea that, say, a mountain could have a soul, or that I'll make sure I'm muted here, just bear with me. I'm not ready yet. So hopefully they're muted. That even a mountain could have a soul, even a landscape could have a soul, even the simplest chair that I'm sat on here could have a soul because it has a kind of a form. So that gives it a sort of kind of an existence already. You know, that gives it a state of existence, may not conscious like we are, but you could say that it has a form, a soul. Now, Buddhism says there's no soul. It says that there's no God, there's no soul. Everything is kind of an energy. And like when we pass from one life to another, because they talk about reincarnation, what is it that reincarnates? Is a sort of energy. It's a sort of energy. But if I understand the Buddhist ways right, it's not like our conscious personality. It's like our remaining essence goes on and takes a new form. But I think within the Hindu and other systems within India, I would have said that the qualities of the human being are incarnated, albeit they might take a slightly different form. They also talk about the idea that this soul is kind of like a divine spark out of the absolute of existence. You know? So they're going to think about that as well, perhaps later. But what is it? There's a big question about where does the soul come from? And there's a lot of people such as Ramana Maharishi, for example. A picture of him, he's a nice fellow. He's one on the desk here. I'll just put him up. You might have heard of him if you get him in focus. Lovely man. But he kind of thought a little bit like the Buddhist way in some respects, that only the essence kind of a person incarnates. And that if we look into the depth of ourselves, if we do self-inquiry, then although we might think there's this idea of an Atman or a Jiva life force or Jiva Atman, as they might call it, although we might think there's something like that, the more we do self-inquiry and we look within and within, we find that there is no self. This is kind of where the Buddha came from in many ways as well, that there is no actual me. And the more you look into yourself and the more you less focus on anything that's not the self, i.e. not the inner process, not the inner world, the inner light, the more you focus on that, the more you realize that there's no such thing as this Atman, that there is only Brahman, as they call it, the infinity of existence. So that the only thing that continues, they would argue, is ignorance itself. The only thing that can incarnate is ignorance. And this process of self-checking that we might do in dhyana, in meditation, will realize that we're not that, not that, not that, not that, we're not that, we're not the soul, we're not the mind, we're not the thought, we're not the consciousness, we're not, boom, we're Brahman, you know. So this is where the kind of the difficulties, I think, sometimes come in the thinking, because when I act as a medium, I say, well, you know, if I can prove that there's an Atman, I can prove that the soul continues after death, that the personality contact continues after death, then actually, although that might be the case in many ways, that we are both the manifest being and the non-manifest being at the same time, that we are indeed God, but we're also in a form, because that's what the soul to me is, the form. The soul is the conduit in many ways. The soul is the part of ourselves that continues, that is still separate. You know, it still has its own sense of existence, the self with a small s. And these are really difficult concepts, I think. But as a medium, what I do, don't I, and what other mediums do, we prove that somebody has gone on, that the personality survives. So I'd say to somebody, for example, you know, I've got your mother here in the spirit world, and she was a difficult personality, or that she used to collect things, or she used to run a antique shop or something. You know, could you turn your mics off, please? And things like that. I was mute that one. Wrong. Oh, sorry. Someone's got a mic on. Keep your mics off, please, guys. Yeah. So I lost it. So basically, as a medium, I'm proving all the time that life continues, and that the people from the spirit world still have that sense of identity. So what I say that I do as a medium is prove that the human personality continues after death. So to me, that's what the soul is. For me, my understanding of it is that what I connect with is the soul of a person on the spirit side. And that soul is still aware, is still conscious. And that soul might also be conscious of having its God nature, but the soul has kind of a form that doesn't go away. So that's where I kind of, when it comes to the idea of the soul, that's where I kind of differ from Buddhists. Because I say, well, you know, Buddhists say there's no such thing. I say, well, there has to be, because I prove it, you know. So if I can prove it, therefore there must be a soul. So those are my thoughts to begin with. And let's have some discussion about this, guys, because they're quite deep concepts here, quite difficult ideas, I think. Yeah. But what do you think? Do you think...
Yeah, people talk about the higher self, don't they? So I've often wondered, is that part of your soul that kind of remains where you will go when you die? And that they say you need to connect to your higher soul. So I do wonder if maybe a part of your soul reincarnates and you've left a part of your soul wherever it is you go when you die.
I think that's
a possibility.
I think this is the case too. I tell you, well, there's a really, actually, another that happens to be by the side of me here. I've been rereading some recently. Sri Aurobindo, okay, brilliant man, who talks about the idea that that's one to put on your reading list. But he wrote about a book called the Oversoul, or the Overself, he called it, because he believed, his another Indian thinker, but he said that little sparks of the divine, like the jiva, again, like I described, incarnate, and they incarnate in order to attain individuality, to understand self-realization, self-awakening, and that there could also be this idea he spoke about, and which is something I kind of think as well, that not the whole personality of who we are incarnates. It's like part of us comes into this world. It's like we got a toe hole into the world. Do you think that?
Yes, that's exactly, only a part of you and your higher self stays.
It's still there.
Wherever, it's still there.
Which could be our guiding part. Like, for example, our conscience could be part of that oversoul, perhaps. You know, so we know what really we should be doing. And that guardian angel idea could be ourselves, our oversoul, that's looking down on and says, hey, just a minute, Craig, you know, that bit of you there is making mistakes. We learned all this in previous lives, you know?
I wonder if, you know, people like mediums and, you know, other psychic people, maybe, you know, a little more of them has or they're connected to whatever's left, you know, of the higher soul.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. And I also think that this is where it comes in when we kind of read the book of life when we pass into the spirit world, which is kind of a symbolic version of saying we remember. We remember, we see the path of our life and what it was for, why we came here, what our deeds, what we had to learn from this life, from this incarnation. We see our mistakes, we see our triumphs, but we also remember who we are. We remember who we have been. We remember who we were in previous lives. We remember who that part of ourselves that is perhaps angelic, that's never incarnated at all. And so my thoughts are that we have this oversoul.
I don't know if you've ever read any Shirley MacLaine. because she's a very spiritual person. She actually wrote a book about, she feels as if she's got one foot on the other side all the time, that she's constantly connecting to the other side. She wrote the whole book. She's written several books on spirituality. And,
yeah, I think I've got one of her books around. I've got a feeling I lent it because I haven't seen it in my book collector. I have books all around me, actually, all rooms of it.
She's very interesting, yes.
Yeah.
But she had this idea, you know, that she was living partly on Earth, you know, as a normal person, and partly on the other side.
Yeah, Shirley MacLaine was a pretty brilliant person, really, because I mean, she was a real leader in the sort of New Age movement when it first started.
Absolutely.
And really got it out to the general public, some of these ideas. And so I have to reread that. I can't remember the name of the book now. I can't remember the name of the book. There was one that was
Out on a Limb. Was one.
Out on a Limb. Well done.
That was one of them. Yes.
Help me with as I get older.
I've been reading Autobiography of a Yogi again, and there was a spiritual teacher of Yogananda called Sri Yukatsvar or something. I'm not very good with Indian names.
He's a hard one to pronounce.
He passed over and then came back in a like a bodily form, but then he was saying that he just by thought could take on whatever body form he wanted to, and that people in the astral realm could do that. So just by because you've had so many lifetimes, you could just pick and choose what form you're going to show yourself in.
Yeah, I found that I found Yogananda's teachings on all this really. I'm reading Yogananda at the moment, actually, too. I'm reading part 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. He's done a massive, great text. These treatise he's written on that. It's taken me a year, but he is brilliant in that respect, because I think Yogananda's got very close to what I think same way I am spiritualists believe, because he doesn't sort of seem to sort of. Because I think this idea of saying there is no self, you know, not this, netty, when they do this type of spirituality where it's all a rejection of everything until you find the Brahman, you know. I think Yogananda's, to me, and the things he's talked about in there, and Sri Yukshrera, materialization in front of him, kind of is very similar to what is in both spiritualism with physical mediumship when people reappear, but also I think in Christianity in many ways, because I mean Yogananda was sent here by Babaji in order to show the West the similarities between Christianity and these Hinduism, which also in turn is part of the greater teachings of the Sanatana Dharma. So I think that's a very, I've quoted that very thing you said there in some of my books before, in What to Do When You're Dead. I quoted that because it kind of shows that life goes on and that the personality, the soul, continues after death.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, and like being part of the big picture, the Brahman, why should it then stop you from being yourself as well? It's like a partnership, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think so. You see, I think this is what we've got, samadhi, when you go into the state of pure meditation where you become one with the universe. That's what yogis, Patanjali and people strive for, that stillness, so that everything is brought to absolute stillness and nothing exists except perfect stillness. Because in the beginning of the Patanjali Sutras, he says, yoga is a movement into the absolute stillness of being. Okay, so we move, as it were, into the absolute stillness of being. And in that absolute stillness of being, that's when we understand everything. We understand the full of existence, what the Brahma is and everything. That's what the goal is. But then one tiny little bit of thought, and it's gone, because the stillness of being is gone. So my thoughts are that what we've got to do, because in a way, a samadhi is a kind of, in a way, a bit of a trance in a way. It's a trance, but it can't be sustained forever. It can't be just a sustained trance. And I don't think that's what the purpose of human existence is, necessarily just to dissolve back into the infinite. I think what we've got to do is we've been given a spark of life, as it were, haven't we? We've been given a little spark of life. And with that, I think we've got to make, through that spark of life, I think we've got to make our knowledge more conscious here and now. So in meditation, we can enter that absolute stillness, but can we still do it when times are difficult? Can we still do it when we're driving the car? Can we still do it when we're changing a baby's nappy? You know, I mean, are we conscious all the time, or are we just conscious when we're in meditation? Yes, we're with the soul now, and the soul's everything, but it's got to be here now. We've got to realize, I think, that everything is this soul. Everything is this consciousness. Everything is, you know, here, and every action and everything that happened, everything that's unfolding, every action that I take, every action that you take, every thought that we have, is the unfolding of what I suppose you could call God. It's the unfolding of the absolute. It's the universe becoming, and everything that is
becoming with the universe as well. So that's why I was saying it's like a two-pronged approach. There's you in your physical body, with a spiritual dimension that then has to dovetail to the Brahman, the universe, and that's what we're doing, balancing the two aspects.
And perhaps another way you could describe it, Valerie, is sort of like, perhaps it's like we're becoming conscious of being God. Right, but God's a difficult word, but we'll use that one for the time being. We're conscious of becoming God, or the universe, and God, or the universe, is conscious of becoming itself. So God is becoming conscious through us. Perhaps, and this is a concept, I don't know if this would work, but it's a thought, you know, perhaps this whole process of existence is the universe itself becoming conscious, God becoming conscious that he is the creation and has made the creation, or I don't believe in, like, actually that's still bad, that creation has happened, you know, and that the process of that happening is us, you know. I mean, there's lots of words there that could trip us all up. Words like creationism, words like God and things like that. I'd rather think of it in perhaps a more bleak form as sort of the universe becoming conscious of its existence. I think would be a
I've
better
heard that.
You know.
Craig, I have a question along those lines. I mean, so many spiritual seekers talk about Yogananda and his works. It's like so universal that I've witnessed. But my question is, along his philosophy and your knowledge of Hindu spirituality, obviously, you know, there's the soul, and a part of us incarnate. A part of us are in 3D doing life. And the Vedic astrological chart points to a specific purpose of why you're here, why you're incarnating. And you came here to do this mission, this purpose. And to not do so, you incur more karma. What is your opinion about that?
Okay, well, all of us, everything that's come in, every human form, every life form that's come into existence, I think can only be in this type of existence we are, which is the, how can I call it, the dualistic, the three-dimensional existence, if we have karma. I think if the karma goes, then we don't incarnate, we achieve moksha, I suppose. And half the battle that most people have is, you know, to get rid of karma. You know, we've got to get rid of karma, but in a way it's a slippery eel, because we're always creating karma all the time. So I think then we have to just accept that karma is part of our life, and that drives us forward. And then we just have to work and live and act so that every everything we do ultimately becomes a divine act. Every word we say becomes a divine act. Every thought we have is a divine act. And this is when you get to the levels of the person that is a fully enlightened. I don't like that word because that can be very much a misconception as well. But we live, we breathe God, as it were. We are God. We're God living this existence. In fact, the existence moves through us. We don't move through it. You know, it's just all happening. But to get to that point, we have to go through our ignorance, and we have to carry that ignorance, which is also as an illusion, until that ignorance has become awakened, become jhana, which has become awake. It's become where the knowledge and the consciousness have become one. And that's not something, that knowledge doesn't come just through learning. That knowledge comes, we have to go through process of ordinary learning as well. But once we shed that as well, and knowledge is just something we have, we know, we exist, we have that knowledge. And that comes also I'm talking it in very intellectual terms here, but it's a very beautiful process, because it's the story of the unfolding of a human. Just like when you think about when a human is born and the beautiful moment when a baby is born, that's something beautiful. And when a flower opens and things, it's beautiful, and the whole of existence is beautiful. So the whole thing is a beautiful process. And sometimes when things go difficult in life, I think to myself, well, it's just a story. It's just the story. It's just the footprints that we're leaving behind us as we walk through the sands by the shore. You know, we just continue the process, and the story sometimes can be difficult and terrible, and sometimes it can be lovely and wonderful, and sometimes it can be full of all the human emotions and feelings and possibilities that are in existence. But meanwhile, I think, coming back to the concept of the soul, that we need to understand also that behind it all, there is the absolute stillness of being. There is the stillness of beauty of the soul itself. And I think we get lost when we think that everything we want is outside there, that it's in front of us on the journey, you know. But then we discover that it's the journey itself that is the awakening, you know. The journey itself is the story, you know. So so my thoughts are there that, you know, if we can keep a certain inner focus, and we can try to keep when things get difficult, an even-mindedness of purpose, then I think that we finally come to a point when that becomes our anchor, and we're rooted all the time in the soul. And then I think that the whole universe ultimately lives and breathes through us. And every direction we look, everything we see the absolute beauty of existence. We see the great love of existence. We see the being of existence. We see the suchness of all things. And then that's when I think we've achieved our goal. It's not somewhere else, it's here and now. And even when we die, it's not somewhere else, it's here and now, right on the deathbed. It's here and now after we pass the deathbed. The story of human existence is in the here and now. It's a bit like the idea of be here now, you know, that everything is in this moment. And I think in this moment, that's when we find that's the only place we find the soul. It's not so, we can talk about it and intellectualize it and talk about the Greeks meant and all the rest of it, like I started off the talk. But ultimately, I think it's something we find by an inner connection that we can do first and foremost by meditation. We can do it by that absolute state of samadhi, but at the end of the day, I think the whole of consciousness, the whole of existence, the whole of human purpose has to be right here, right now, in this moment, and always in this moment, no matter how it changes. Anyway, some thoughts on that. I go off, don't I?
The universe must have been created, though, mustn't it? There must have been a creation.
I don't necessarily think it has to. I mean, okay, we know that the universe came into existence, put it that way. We know it in scientific terms, it came into existence with the Big Bang. That seems that is when time began. Yeah.
But
then time is just one dimension of the whole of existence. You know, when we start looking at things like the idea of the multiverse, maybe these coming into existences have been happening on multiple dimensions in multiple time zones ever since existence could ever, you know, and you start thinking, oh, what if you pull time out of the equation? The universe doesn't have a beginning, middle, and an end. It just is,
No.
or it just isn't at the same
I
time.
mean, lots of people ask, what happened before the Big Bang? Was there some? But I mean, a physicist will say there was nothing there before the Big Bang because time began at the Big Bang.
Yeah, but
So
then
there was
it might
nothing
be.
there. But that's a very difficult concept.
Yeah, it came out of what they call a singularity. I mean, which is a difficult thing to explain or describe or get your head around at all. But maybe there's been multiple singularities. Perhaps every black hole, when they cave in on themselves, create a singularity that bursts into life in another dimension as a new universe.
Oh yes, there are multiple singularities. Yeah,
and in the center of every galaxy, there's a black hole, which could perhaps, why is that?
Yeah.
Did that universe come out of a black hole from another galaxy? I mean, we have no. I mean, I don't think we can ever get to the bottom of it.
No.
The
universe also was opaque at first, and then there was light, which is the same as in Genesis. If you read Genesis and you read the story of the creation, they are actually very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, they say that God created the world in 7 days, but I think maybe it was 7 eras, not 7 days.
Possibly.
Each era corresponded to a day, and that's what they mean by 7 days.
And the word, what was the word? The word might have been Om.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, it could well have been.
Yeah.
Oh,
with all these, I mean, the Genesis stories are very interesting, actually. I mean, I also think, what's the snake all about too? Because I was thinking were the snake people, the people from other dimensions or something, were the snakes? Why were they the bringer of knowledge, and why did we have to shun that knowledge? Knowledge surely is a good thing. Why would it be a snake? I mean, so many thoughts there. The mind boggles with all of that, and if God created the Garden of Eden, why did he put a snake in it? Why did he want mankind to sin, and why give him an apple to eat? We were meant to sin. Those concepts are quite hard to get your head around, really, when you think. But then it's mythical. It's a mythical way of explaining things that are impossible to put into logical language. This is why we use imagery, don't we? We use storytelling to try to explain things that are impossible for us to understand. This is what myth comes from. It comes from this idea of trying to explain the universe, doesn't it?
Yeah. I shall ask the vicar about the serpent in the Garden of Eden. See what he says.
Be careful. He'll throw you out. Why did God create the apple if we weren't supposed to eat it? Why put it there in the first place?
I'll ask him that.
Why did he want us to fall? And he wanted us to fall so that we could gain knowledge. That's what we fell for, because we came from innocence. William Blake puts it very well, actually, because in his beautiful poems, they're very simple on one level because they're childlike poems, aren't they? But when you look at it on a deeper level, and particularly in the book of Innocence and Experience, he talks about that we come from innocence, the Garden of Eden, we fall into experience, the eating the apple and taking the knowledge, as it were, and then we return back to the innocence again. But this time we've been through the path of experience. So our path in life is partly from innocence to experience, return to innocence. In fact, if you take it in Christian terms, again, Jesus said, didn't he say something like, you have to be like a child to enter the kingdom of heaven?
Did he? Yes, quite possibly.
Innocence is the return to innocence. We can't take with us, in order to have the understanding of the absolute, we can't take with us all our intellectual ideas. We can't take with us all our concepts. We have to chuck it all away, and our brain has to be wiped clean, as it were, with just the pure innocence of pure acceptance or devotion, I suppose is the Hindu way would talk.
Maybe apple, I was just thinking of this, maybe the apple is the legricol for desire, because if you do see a nice juicy apple, you do think, oh, I'd like a bit of that.
Yeah. It could be, couldn't it? Yeah.
I just had a thought about the serpents and the Hindu religions, the Nagas, which I know you've discussed before, and are part of the Alesha Nakshatra in Vedic astrology. They slither on the earth. They're connected to the earth. And this just came to me. I don't know if it's at all accurate, but it just came to me that what the whole myth of the Garden of Eden and the apple and the serpent was that what Christ was teaching, or what this new philosophy was teaching, was to rise above the earth. And there's a certain energetic of the earth, and it's possible, again, I have no idea if this is a complete thought, but that it's teaching you to go above the earth. Energetic.
Yeah, Catherine, you could put that into the idea of the Kadakas, like the medical symbol with the two entwined snakes and the wings at the top, which was carried by Mercury, wasn't it? So it's the idea that the snakes have risen with the wings, and yet at the same time it's also a symbol, of course, of the Kundalini, of the Kundalini, that's energy that spirals, comes up like a DNA spiral, perhaps. So there's lots of stuff hidden in that concept, actually, from the earth to the heavens. And of course, the other thing with the snake is it sheds its skin. So people would have looked at a snake and see it shed its skin, and I think, what on earth is going on with that? How does it what's it done? It's been born again. So the snake becomes a symbol of the rebirth, of being born from ignorance into knowledge. The snake is also, like I say, it's in the Kundalini, the entwined snakes in the Kundalini, that the two channels move up through the Ida and Pingala, but through the Sushumna in the middle, but it's like a Kadaka shape is formed, which could even be thought of as a DNA double helix spiral of two snakes, possibly. And then there's also the symbol of the snake biting, the rubus, with the idea of the snake biting its own tail, where it eats itself but yet still regenerates, as a symbol of the eternity of the universe, for eternal regeneration. So they looked at these snakes, and out of it came a lot of symbolism. And some people like von Däniken have speculated that they were space people. Sorry, Valerie. Yeah.
Shiva had a snake round his neck. I don't know what that was symbolic of.
Yeah, well, there's levels to that as well, because again, it's the Kundalini, and he has the snakes above, the gods have the snakes above the head and things like that. Shiva also stirred the oceans. And when it's a bit like the story of Pandora's box, you open the box and everything comes out of it. In the Hindu stories, the gods were arguing, and they argued about various things. And so Shiva stirred the ocean and everything came out, including the poison. So he has a blue throat because at the throat, he stopped the poison, right? Yeah. So on a symbol, this is when the Kundalini has released. There's the poisons is the stopping of the ignorance, I think. There could be lots of different ways of interpreting this, but read it up, there's stuff out there. But it's like the blue, it's like it stopped the poison. And also there's a second center at the back of the head called the Bindu, which is also drops the eternal. The human form is supposed to have the ability to live eternally. And we drop a little drop of nectar that comes from the back of the head and drops into the throat center, but it's killed each time by the poison that rises up. So in order to attain long life, for example, we have to capture that precious nectar. These are internal concepts of, you'd have to look into the very deep stuff in yoga for this, but the snakes are something there to do, I think, with lots of things. They're about knowledge, because we got hints of it in all the religions about the idea of knowledge. So knowledge of what? Knowledge of the soul. Maybe the tree of life, for example, is the tree of life, and from the tree of life we take the apple. What's a tree like? It's again like the nervous system of the human body. Could that also be another clues hidden away that we've lost about finding eternal life? And you see it in everything. You see everywhere these stories of the snakes, and in the Hindu, some of the old ancient stories in India, which I think, and also in Sumeria and places and things like that, all over the world, there's these hidden stories of the idea that who were these snake people, the Naga that I talked about, like you say, is it Kathleen said about this in the, it's also in the Indian astrology, Rahu and Ketha, that there's that there is perhaps in the skies, there were the snake people. And the story goes that there were giant snake people that came to the earth who gave us, who kind of we stole their knowledge. We stole the knowledge of those people, of those snake people, and then we turned their knowledge against them to destroy the snake people, the Naga, who became the ordinary snakes that we see in the world. But before, they were the highly conscious beings. This is the mythology of it. But perhaps behind that mythology, like behind many myths and legends, we find remnants of true things. So did some other beings perhaps visit us from outer space who had a reptilian type of form? I don't want to get into the idea of the Queen's a reptile, that nonsense, but you know what, perhaps there was some connection with people way back, you know. And all I can say is perhaps, because who knows, you know.
Well, we don't know, but I know a lot of people are really frightened of snakes, aren't they? They see them as really horrible, nasty creatures and won't have anything to do with snakes.
Yeah, Jane's absolutely terrified of snakes. If I bring a rubber snake home or something, she's terrified. I mean, kids have played it on her, but I mean, it is, and that may be also another part of the symbolism that's entwined in all this too. But
yes,
you know, in order to find enlightenment, we first have to overcome our fear, you know. And a snake's a double-edged sword, really, in a way, isn't it? Just mixing my metaphors here, but it's like it's poisonous, and yet it's also the liberator, you know.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, these are fascinating things, you know.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I suppose, you know, since my talk's about the soul, I suppose in some respects they are kind of a bit of a symbol of the soul, the dualism of the soul in some respects, you know.
Yeah, I'm a bit unsure about this business of everything having a soul. Because, I mean, you know, if you cook your dinner, then that means you're getting rid of souls, aren't you? If you're eating carrots, you're eating souls. I'm not really quite
well,
sure
my thoughts
about
are
that.
there's a rudimentary soul to things. I think I would have said, I mean, to express it in my terms, I would say there's consciousness and there's being. Okay, so we have being and consciousness. So we have quite a lot of consciousness, and therefore I think we also have a greater sense of being as well. I think on a rudimentary level, a simple forming atom, because it's formed into an atom, now has being. And that being, in some respects, is connected to the concept of consciousness. But its consciousness has not increased to the point that it's self-conscious. But only when you get a larger degree of these two qualities that I'm going to call consciousness and being, do we become self-aware. And so a human, and maybe other creatures in the universe, have a higher degree of consciousness and being. But even the most rudimentary things has a little tiny spark of consciousness, and also initially quite a lot of sense of being, because it's being. So a mountain knows it's the mountain, but it's not conscious of being the mountain. You see what I mean? It has mountainness, right? It has mountainness, but and a rock even on it would have rockness, as it were. But they don't have the same qualities of consciousness and awareness that we would have.
Well, no, I'd hope not.
But maybe, who knows? If you read, I mean, some of the tribal, shamanistic type of things say, yes, they do. You know, they say that the eagle will come and it will have just as conscious as a human being, and so forth.
Well, the Jains say they must never kill anything, don't they? They sweep, you know, the paths before them so they don't kill insects and whatever.
Same with the Buddhists too. They say that all the worms in the soil, when we dig the ground up to make a temple, we've got to sift every single shovelful, because every worm that's in there could have been your mother in a previous life. So we must have such love for all beings. Sounds tough,
imagine selling that. Imagine selling that to a builder.
Yeah, well, in Tibet, before the Chinese went in, pulled it all apart with bulldozers. That's how they used to do things. If you read 7 Years in Tibet, a brilliant book, you know, they're you know, the person that's visited Tibet is looking at them digging up the soil with little spoons. You know?
Oh dear. Yeah.
So, anybody got any other thoughts on?
Well, I think we've
No. So,
I think we've talked that one out.
so I think
There's
we probably,
so much to think about, really.
okay. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say goodbye to the people from YouTube that would join us, because this will go up onto YouTube. Then we can have another chat about other things afterwards if you'd like, just a general bit for the patrons. So okay, this is the end of the story, end of it now. So thanks for joining us, guys, from on YouTube here. Hope you enjoy. If you like this type of thing, come and join us on Patreon, and you can also help the channel by subscribing to us on Patreon. And yeah, so see you soon. Bye for now. Right, now we can just continue just general chit chat. So I hope you enjoyed that talk. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting topic. Thanks to Helen, who also suggested it, you know.
It was very interesting. I mean, it's so much to think about, isn't it? It's difficult sometimes to take everything in.
They are
that
difficult.
people have said you have to go away and think about it. And,
you do. There's some quite big concepts there, isn't there? There's this whole idea of dualism and non-dualism, you know, and things like that. You know, is the self an illusion? You know, is existence an illusion? But I
think of the soul as like being the letter put into the envelope of our body, and then when we die, then the envelope is left, and the letter, as it were, is free.
Yeah, or sometimes we describe it in spiritualism sometimes as the idea of, you know, the body is the overcoat and the soul is us, and we take off the overcoat and now we move forward without the overcoat. It's just a layer, a sheath.
Yeah.
And again, it's a similar idea in the yogic teachings too, that we have koshas, that there's multiple layers, as it were, to our existence. You know, physical body is the I've forgotten the mana means food, the food sheath. You know, we throw the body off. That's the first, the manapura or something like that. The food, that's the first sheath. It's the idea of the physical body. And then we have the prana sheath, which I can't remember if I got the names right, but we got the sheath of just like the energy body, you know, which sustains the physical body. And then we'll also have the intuitive sheath, which is like our intuitive knowledge that connects us with the universe. Oh, no, we've got the mind sheath. Sorry, before that, we've got the prana sheath, then we've got the mind sheath, the psychological aspects of ourselves. Then we have the intuitive side of ourselves, which is also connected into the infinite. And then we have the bliss sheath, which is the one sheath before the final part of ourself, which is the higher consciousness. I should have talked about that, actually, the idea of the koshas, but we could perhaps do a talk about that sometimes. And this idea that there is multiple layers to us, you know, multiple layers of our existence.
Craig,
Is that
watching?
Oh, sorry.
I thought I sent it to you, but I don't think the message went through. It was a very fascinating interview with Aubrey Marcus. I don't know if you know him, but he really explores consciousness, working with shamans and with drugs, which I think there's different schools of thought about that, but he employs, you know, shamanistic plant medicine when he goes on his journeys. And he was talking to this individual, and you may know him, Kadrick Olson, who grew up in the spiritual tradition, and he's written several books, and he's coming from the philosophy of the Norse gods and Norse occult knowledge. But it just was released a few days ago, so you can go online and find it. But he was talking about how everything is in us, and this probably is a subject for another Zoom call, but that everything's in us, everything we meet, you know, all this evil that we think is around us is us. It's some part of us, and that when you love it, it dissipates, and it no longer is harmful to you, or no longer harmful, you know, or malefic to you, and that it's all us. And then, well, there are some real entities out there, but so much of these are a part of our own consciousness, like the Tibetan tulpas are created, and you know, the egregores. I think we've talked about that a bit. But the bottom line is, for me, I just, you know, and what you associate with is what you become. So I'm just personally how I deal with this very complex issue. And there's no definitive answer. It's just do good, wish people goodwill. It's like, the will to do good in the world, and there's certain entities out there in our vast mythological history that focus on that. So for me, I'm just, covering my bets here and just trying to connect with, the higher sources that just want good in the world. And because I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not sure anyone really has a definitive answer. So I'm just hedging my bets and want to be
good idea.
Goodness.
Yeah, I think you're doing the right thing. I mean, it all boils down to, if you do good things, good comes back to you. And I think, what you described there is very similar to most mystical thinking, is that the world about us is what we create. We have created this world. This is what we experience in this world, what we create. But at the same time, also, others are creating worlds around themselves too, and worlds come into contact with one another. And I think we do alter and change each other's world, because that's what part of the nature of being in this physical existence is, I think. And so, for example, someone can come into your life that can cause chaos in your life, or cause a major problem for everything or everybody, which might push the whole thing into a different, we're not all sitting in our own individual bubbles. And then maybe there's other forces also that come into the world that can also cause tremendous disruption. An explosion of anger, for example, can sometimes create and destroy things in such a short time that's done like that, and this is almost acts like you would almost describe like an evil spirit, that it comes in and poisons everything. Or one bad act can destroy a whole lifetime of achievement. I mean, you can climb to the heights, you can become great on any level, including your spiritual work, but it can be overdone within seconds. And sometimes it can be overdone by people with evil intent who destroy people. Each of us has our Judases in life as well sometimes, don't we? So things step in that can disrupt. So it's not a complete smooth path, but I think you're right that the way forward in life is always to just try to keep being good, doing good, seeing good, acting good, not just doing good also means seeing the good in others, because sometimes people do terrible things and you try to see the best side of them, you try to see the better side. And I think if you do that, your focus is going to be always much more on the soul, isn't it? Much more on the divine and much more less on the problem. I think, we look to the sun, not to the shadows. And then I think we find greater happiness.
Well, in this video, Craig, interestingly, they did talk about this very issue, that there are these entities that come in. They are real. Some of them are a part of you, and some of these forces are outside of you. But, Kendrick Olson gave us one example of how, Chairman Mao came in and he destroyed, went into Tibet and destroyed all the temples and murdered all the people. And there's two ways of looking at these events. I mean, if you were being murdered in the monastery, it was very bad, it was very evil, but it dispersed the Tibetan knowledge throughout the world. So who's to say, from which perspective, that sheer evil actually spread great knowledge, which has benefited mankind? So there's, in this dualistic world, there's two ways of looking at this. And when, say, there's evil things that are happening in your world, well, and this is what Audrey Marcus was talking about, is that it gives the individual here in 3D, you develop courage and you rise to the occasion. So it gives you an opportunity to express those parts of your being, part of your mission. So it's a very complicated, complex universe that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, we don't achieve our greatest things sat on the beach having a cocktail, do we? We achieve the greatest things when something has given us a kick up the behind and shaken our world to the core. And then we forced to reassess and move on and change. And sometimes these are terrible things, and these are very, very difficult things in life that you have to just deal with. But then at the same time, they can sometimes, if you let it be, can be the making of you rather than the breaking of you. And that was the same with Tibet, like you say. I mean, I think the Dalai Lama even spoke about that. He said that Tibet was destroyed, but then the teachings have gone all over the world now. And I wouldn't be teaching, he said, I wouldn't be teaching here like I am talking on television at the time. He said, I seem to remember, if it wasn't for the fact that Tibet we were becoming too insular. That was our problem. We'd gone too much away from the world and cut ourselves up too much, and now we've reached out to the whole of humanity. And we would never have known much about Tibet before 1953 or 2, when Tibet was taken over. Before that, it was a weird place where 1 or 2 people went to and a few people read about, and it was more like mysterious stories, like the Shangri-La stories and things people would know about. They never know the real teachings of Buddhism or Bon come to that, So yeah, so sometimes there's silver linings to things.
Yeah, I don't think they allowed women into Tibet though, did they? I think they weren't very keen on travellers going.
Yeah, I mean there was women shaman as well, and women and the female monks. I don't think they were quite like that, but it was mainly the men that became the monks, as far as I know.
Yes, yeah. I don't think they like women coming in from outside. Yeah,
it's the same in all societies.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting how people see each other in different ways, though. Some people will see one person as absolutely lovely, and another person say, "Oh, that horrible woman over there." It's just sometimes it's just our perception of things, isn't it, that's altered.
It's often how we see the world, isn't it? Yeah, it is how we see the world that makes the world a good or bad place. If we've got I always try to be an optimist. I think it's best to be an optimist because the world always seems to be a lot more rosy,
Yeah,
and although I might be an idiot, I mean, I think it sees you through in the end.
See the best in people until they, maybe do something. Well, I think even when people can be a bit nasty, sometimes they're just having an off day.
Something's happened. I think most people are fundamentally good. All people are fundamentally good. They make mistakes. And I think also with our memory too, it's important to focus on the positive memory of the time. Because how we look at our lives, when we look back at our lives, we could focus on all the terrible things that happened in our lives, and everybody's life's got horrible things happened, but we can build that up in our mind and turn it into something that can cripple us. We can look at it all and we can say, that was terrible, but look at that good thing that came out of it. We need to look always at the positive, and particularly the spiritual, and then I think we transform ourselves. We transform ourselves. And we're not deluding ourselves. It's just how we, half full, half empty. Think of it as half full, and you'll be a lot happier. My glass is nearly empty completely, actually.
Craig, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you feel that maybe there are certain places, like could there be a place where there's a lot of like negative energy that will make people react just negatively? For instance, like if you work in a very toxic workplace, do you see people just completely being negative because of that? Could that have something to do with just the vibe of everybody?
Well, I think so. Again, this is subjective opinion here, but I always feel that certain places have certain energies to them. There's certain places, houses sometimes, certain spots in nature that are negative and horrible, and there's bad energy there. And then there's other places where there's fantastic energy. I mean, typical thing, like near here, we got Stonehenge, fantastic energy, although it's full of tourism energy nowadays, so it's a bit lost. But like Arunachala, which I climbed in India, fabulous energy there, incredible energy. It really blew me away when I walked up. I couldn't believe it touched me, And I'm sure that Kailash and the sacred spots of the ancient places in Australia, for example, or America, where for centuries people knew that there was power there, and here in the UK, churches have been built over most of the holy places. Ayers Rock.
Avebury. Have you been to Avebury?
Avebury, fabulous.
I haven't been there. I'd love to go.
Not too far from you're in Cornwall, aren't you? But no, fabulous. Avebury, and you can touch the stones, and you can sit under the stones, and there's the burial chambers, the ancient burial chambers further up. If you go up to the huge, I can't remember the name of it now, big huge stone linked where you could go underneath it. I mean, we sat there alone on a windy we were hiking and we sat alone on these ancient stones with not a soul around. I hadn't seen, because it was wet, not a soul around anywhere, no signs up saying this is a such and such stone, and just sat there like you were there thousands of years ago, you know. And the energy is fantastic. And also, if people all go to Stonehenge, but all around the surrounding area there's tumuli, and we were walking that area and could actually sit on top of one of the tumuli, have our lunch and look across to Stonehenge miles away. You know.
Well, you used to be able to walk amongst the stones at Stonehenge and actually touch them, which I've done when I was younger.
Yeah,
my mother lived there. My mother used to live very close to Stonehenge in Amesbury. That was where she was brought up. And
we used to go out there.
You could. And it's a very special place.
Yeah. And I saw that, so in answer to the question, definitely. I mean, certain places have very, very powerful energy. Other places, they have some very negative energy, often by human actions there, I think. Sometimes it stays in the atmosphere.
I'll tell you that, one place was Belsen, wasn't it? The site where Belsen was.
Yeah, they say the birds don't sing. They do.
The birds didn't. The birds wouldn't. I think they've come back now.
Yeah, but I think there are places
where changed.
Dark energies in some places. And even in some, you know, homes and some people's places have that black energy, you know. So I think these things definitely are out there. And
is there do you recommend anything to do, like if you have no options but to be in that place for the meanwhile, what can you do to try to
I think
deviate from it?
I think you can break the energy in a place a number of ways. I think song and mantra and cheerful thoughts are very good. Groups of people singing in a place, a noise, they say, breaks the energy up. A lot of people call it geopathic stress, because sometimes people say that this is caused by undersea seams in the Earth's surface that create a sense of negative energy that comes up from the Earth itself, negative Earth energy. So there's machines out there for that. What do we call them? I can't remember their name, who does it now. I forgot, I used to know the people well. I've forgotten. Geo something, he calls it geopathic stress machines.
Geophysicists.
No, geopathic is the idea. It's not really a scientific thing at all. It's sort of a new agey type thing. But and so they say, you know, you can sleep. They say sleep with corrugated iron under your bed. It stops the negative energy coming up. They say to face to sleep facing north is a good thing in there, and then also crystals and things people will often use to interact and stop the energy. So there's lots. It might be a good one to do. We could perhaps do a talk on that sometimes and go into that a bit more detail.
Great.
Anyway, I'm going to have to finish. One last one. No, okay. I think we're going to finish there now, guys, because I've got other commitments now. So thank you for joining me. I'll post this up I'll post this actually up, if you don't mind. I'll post this up on YouTube, the whole thing actually, because I think our other talks at the end of that were quite interesting, if no one doesn't mind, because if you didn't mind me doing that. Okay, we will do. All right then. This now goodbye to everybody.
Okay, right. Thanks, Craig. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for now.